UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Welcome, listeners, to another episode of All Good Things, a Star Trek Universe podcast here on the United Federation of Podcast Network. I am your host, Amy Nelson, and joined with me, thankfully, is our executive producer, Brandon Shea-Mutala. Brandon, welcome to All Good Things.
I am very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am looking forward to doing this wonderful discussion. It's weird that you do this show alone.
What do you mean alone? I've got my good friend Patrick, who joins me.
Oh, I thought he was just a rotating guest, because you've had a lot of rotating guests lately.
Yeah, this whole COVID thing has got schedules really up in the air, but I'm trying to be consistent and to bring out some good podcasts, and thankfully people are stepping up and filling in, so.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and this one was actually my idea. I messaged you the other night and I said, are you going to talk about this? And you're like, I wasn't planning on it.
Okay, so the reason why is because I feel like podcasts that cover current events, like, they don't do well over time. So that's why I sort of shy away from the current events, but I think this will be good if we have a dedicated podcast. We are going to talk about Strange New Worlds. And then if listeners, come 10 years, want to skip over this one, then it'll be fine.
See, I always think it's fun to listen back at them because we make all these like ridiculous predictions, and then you listen back and you're like, ha, they were so wrong.
That's what I don't like. I don't like being wrong.
Well, you had 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard that you covered where you guys were wrong every week.
We did a lot of build-up when I was over on the Edge, where that was the case, too, and oh boy.
Yeah, I remember in season 1 of Discovery when we were covering it, I'm like, you know how they're getting out of the mirror universe, right? Ripper's coming back, and he didn't show up.
Yeah, I know. So many crazy predictions. Well, you can find the network on Twitter and Facebook at UFP Earth. And if you'd like to send us an email, you can message the network at contact@ufp.earth. Listeners, I have yet to receive an email. I would just love an email.
It's because I'm deleting them all before they get to you.
Brandon! That's what I
get them.
thought, because we have great listeners here.
Well, they all get filtered through Tony.
Okay. Got to go through the big wigs before they trickle down to me, I guess. All right, so we are going to talk about Strange New Worlds. This is a new show that CBS has announced. And so Brandon, when did you first hear that this was a for sure thing?
It was actually a couple of hours after it was announced. I got home at, I guess it was about 2:00 Pacific time on Friday that I got home. And where I'm working right now, the Wi-Fi is not very good, and because they're revamping all the computer software everywhere. And so I missed the announcement by 6 or 7 hours or something like that. So it was a little bit later in the day on Friday that I caught the announcement. How about you?
Yeah, I usually get all of my news on Facebook and Twitter, and my feeds and stream were just all of this announcement, so I happened to catch it then. So I'm sure it was Friday. I think I retweeted Saturday, so I was like, sorry I'm late, but here it is. And
it would have been the Friday of the announcement. Like, we're recording this on the 18th of May, right, which is just a few days after they announced it. But, they just announced that the show's coming, and I think a lot of people have been expecting this. I mean, there's been a lot of fan petition out there that they wanted a Pike series. They wanted to see the Enterprise again because, Pike and Spock and Number One were so well received on the second season of Discovery. And it's really funny, because Discovery tried to do all this new stuff and they tried to be different. And, as much as I appreciate the first season, the second season relied heavily on characters that we knew, and they had kind of boxed themselves in this corner back in season 1 when they decided to make Michael Burnham a ward of Sarek, like not necessarily a sister to Spock, but like a foster sister to Spock. And they kind of, they boxed themselves in that corner. And that was one of the original ideas of Brian Fuller, was to involve Amanda and Sarek because he liked the character of Amanda so much. And so that's kind of why and how Michael Burnham became this character that was related to Spock. And I mean, aside from that, like, to me, there's no real reason to have Michael Burnham be related to Sarek in any way. But by doing that, it opened up the possibility of, we're going to see Spock. And then so it opened up this whole debate of what are they going to do? Should they cast Zachary Quinto? Should they recast him? Should they not show him at all? Like, what should they do? I was a big proponent of recasting him from the very beginning. And, like a lot of people were upset by that. And I don't understand why anybody would be upset by that. It just makes sense to recast him. But it hit a nerve, and season 2 hit a fan nerve, and a lot of people were very happy with Anson Mount as Pike. I think he was perfectly cast. I don't know how to say her last name, but Rebecca Romijn. Not Romaine, because Mira Romaine was on the Enterprise. It's like Romijn or Rojmin or something like that. There's a J in there.
I've always heard Rebecca Romijn.
Maybe it is pronounced that way. Okay, well, maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure. So I've never heard it pronounced. I fully admit I could be wrong. I'm bad with names. But these characters have been cast well, and I mean, they built the set for the Enterprise, so I think a lot of people expected this announcement to come. And so this is no surprise to me. I've been fully expecting this. So I don't know. That's my initial impression on it. This is not a surprise.
Well, I really was surprised. I knew the fan outpouring, especially at last year's STLV and during some of the Discovery wrap-up of season 2, and, hearing Kurtzman say, "We hear you." And I was like, do they really? Going back to season 2 of Discovery, when they were bringing in Spock, I was a strong proponent of not bringing in Spock or Pike or number 1, because I really wanted the universe to expand and give us new characters. We were totally fine with Next Gen, brand new characters, Deep Space Nine, brand new characters, right? We're building this universe. And now we get Discovery Season 2 bringing in these old known characters. I mean, I didn't care that they recast Spock. I sort of expected it, but I didn't want to see Spock. I didn't want to see, Pike per se. So it's interesting because they announced like the Section 31. And they've announced the 2 animation series and, the Picard. And I'm like, my gosh, they've got so much going. There's no way that they're going to add another series. And yet here we are. So I was completely shocked by the announcement.
See, to me, this is really exciting because if you go back to the very first roundtable I ever did on Trek FM, I think it was number, 4 or 5 or 6 or something like that, way back in the feeds. I had said that what I want out of a new Star Trek show would be an anthology show similar to True Detective or American Horror Story, where each season is a story, but each season is a completely independent story. And, this is almost better. Right? Because we're not just getting an anthology season, we're getting anthology series where they're coming up with all this stuff all the time and they're going to be rotating a lot. The interesting thing is what they have latched on. And there is no doubt about it that Strange New Worlds is coming because of the fan response. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. The fans spoke and they heard, because a lot of the complaints that people had about Discovery and Picard, they are actively addressing in this show by going episodic and by going with an optimistic storytelling approach. Like it or dislike it, like, modern storytelling is rather dark and rather serialized. That's the standard for television right now. But there's been a large outcry of people wanting to have that old TOS style, that old TNG style, one episode, one story, move to the next planet. And that Star Trek has its place. That is what Star Trek is. I'm a big fan of the season-long storytelling because I love how much it can open up and how much more in depth you can get with the characters. I personally prefer that, but I'm very intrigued to see what they can do with this, because this can open up a lot of doors, and this is a very fascinating approach. But I will say that I'm a huge fan of the idea to go to an optimistic view of the future, because to me that is what Star Trek is. It's always looking at how can we get along. It's always been looking at something, misunderstanding it, and the solution is realizing that you've misunderstood it. And by seeing it through a fresh set of eyes, you realize that generally all around we're all good people. And to me, that's generally what Star Trek is. Not every episode, obviously, but generally they come to a happy ending at the end of each episode, and I like that.
Yeah, I do too. And funny you bring up the roundtable, because I do remember listening to that, because that's when I had found Trek FM and was just devouring everything that they put out. And that anthology idea, I really thought that's great. I would like to see that. And I feel like we're getting that with Discovery and Picard, this anthology. I really feel like it with Picard, that I'm looking forward to season 2, because it's like they finished that story. Now let's start another one. However, my TNG little heart does miss the episodic nature, and that's just what I grew up on. And to just go and watch one episode here and one episode here, you haven't been able to do that with these series. And so I'm very excited when, to read the reports of what they've been saying about, yes, that it's got this new hope. And when Anson Mount on the little video clip and Pike and Rebecca were there, he's like, this is the time we really need to have this optimism, this hope, that bringing us together. And like you said, recognizing diversity. That is what I feel Star Trek does best, of going and exploring and saying, gosh, what happened? And then finding the commonality, bringing together, and ending up with an episode that is great. It was interesting. I read, though, that they were saying that even if, say, I think they used, what's the Edith Killer one?
City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah, that they use that as an example where it's like, okay, then next week, Kirk was just fine. Well, that's not going to happen, because there's going to be, some ramifications and some spillover as far as the character goes. But I think the story, they're going to keep the story point episodic.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like to hear that. See, one of the things that look, okay, so I like Discovery. It's my least favorite Star Trek series. It's bottom of the tier for me. As much as I loved the first 8 episodes of Picard, and I didn't like the finale of it, the 2-part finale, Star Trek Picard is not my favorite Star Trek series, and it won't be. I like it more than Discovery. But one of the problems that I dislike about the current era of Star Trek is the way that they're writing it, where there's always a twist or a turn or a surprise coming, and so the viewers are constantly sitting there trying to guess, because that's the expectation, is that there's going to be some kind of weird twist that's going to, change the way you've seen episodes in the past, because it all plays together. I'm looking forward to it, hopefully not doing that, right? Because I just want to sit down and enjoy an episode and not worry about, oh, what did this shot mean? And, oh, it turned out to not mean anything. That shot that they lingered on of that shuttlecraft leaving Mars in that second episode of Picard? Yeah, guess what? We didn't even want to bother going back to that, because it doesn't matter. So they leave these things all around, and it's not important stuff, or it's some weird, ridiculous thing that you couldn't even predict that comes out of left field. And it's like, well, I don't know. So to me, they've missed the mark on that. A lot of people like it, and that's fine. But I'm looking forward to just going episode by episode. I like to see character growth, right? Because I think that we got that in Deep Space Nine. We got that in Voyager. We got that in Next Generation. We got character growth, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing that kind of thing as well.
So there has been rumor that, total rumor, listeners, that they're going to bring in a Captain Kirk And I read that it's the actor that plays the Mandalorian.
I don't know about that. So, like, the guy that plays the Mandalorian for the voice is